This week, I have the most fun and interesting conversation to share with you guys. I just interviewed Hope England. She is the coolest multi-hyphenate I think I have ever met. She is a comedian, an actress, a trauma psychotherapist. She owns a group therapy practice. She also has a nonprofit that centers around healing and comedy. And we have a really brilliant conversation about psychedelic assisted therapy, among a million other things. She is probably the coolest therapist I've ever met. If you guys need one, call her. I would recommend her to anyone. I want to have her on the podcast 85 million more times. I could have talked to her for like 10 million hours. She's just the coolest. And I cannot wait to share this conversation and what this woman is doing. It is women like this who are going to help save the planet, heal the world, empower us all. You guys are in for a treat.
Hi.
Hey. Welcome, Hope. How you doing?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me into your space. And
my gosh. Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm going to throw that right back at you because, as I was saying briefly before, you are probably one of the coolest multi-hyphenates I've ever come across. And we met through a mutual friend. Well, we're meeting for the first time, but I heard of her through a mutual friend. And I was like, what? Because you have all of my interests, but are areas of expertise for you. And we both have comedy and acting backgrounds. We both help people. And I just want to dig into, like, how did you become this way? This has to be a fascinating journey. You don't have to tell me every single nuance, but like, where did you grow up? How did you become this fascinating human?
I'm going to tell you everything.
Everything.
So strap in.
Were you
We're going to be here for 6
C-section?
Traumatic birth, okay? Okay, yeah, let's get into it. So I grew up in rural Tennessee in a very small town outside of Nashville. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty typical, right? Like very conservative. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked at a bank. It was, just like kind of small town childhood. For college, I was like, I want to get as far away as possible. I wanted to move to New York. I wanted to move out of the country. Like, I had never done anything like that, so all I could think about was like, I just want to see the world. So I didn't do that. I went to the University of Tennessee.
Wait, what happened? Sorry, I should have told you I'm probably going to interrupt you a million times. And
totally fine. It's totally fine. And I'll forget what I'm saying because I'm ADD. So just feel free to interrupt me.
I love it.
Wait, so what was the question?
Wait, so what, you wanted to go as far away as possible and you did not. What happened?
I did not, because my parents were like, you don't even know what you want to do and we're not paying for that. And you get scholarships if you go in state. So I was like, okay. So I went to the University of Tennessee because it was as far away as I could get, still in state. And it was a really big university school. So, went there, had no idea what I was doing. I changed my major like 6 times. I dropped out for a little bit. I went back after that. I just was grasping at anything. And my family, especially my father, was the type that was like, unless you're a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, a teacher, then it doesn't really count, was his kind of old school belief. So I changed my major again. I had to take a theater class as an elective. It was massive. There were like 300 plus people in the class.
Oh, wow.
We had to put on this huge performance for the class. And on the day of the performance, I forgot all of my lines. Like, I didn't remember anything. And I got up there and I was like, oh shit. So I just made it up. And
amazing.
Afterwards, my professor was like, you need to see me. And I was like, damn, I'm going to fail a theater class. Like, this is sad. And I went to see her and she said, did you make all of that up? And I said, yeah. And she was like, that was incredible. You should do improv. And I was like, I don't know what improv is, but like, I want to go hang out with my friends. So whatever. And I just started looking it up one night in my dorm room. I was like, what is improv? And then I saw that like Tina Fey did improv, and Amy Poehler and Molly Shannon and Will Ferrell, and, you know, all these people that I watched growing up on SNL. And then I saw that this place in Chicago called the Second City was considered like the Harvard of improv, you know, and like the improv mecca. So I packed up my stuff and I told my parents, I'm moving to Chicago. And they were like, no, you're not. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to study comedy. It's like their worst nightmare. You know, they're like, what the fuck?
I got the same. My mom was really upset when I was like, I'm going to quit my hedge fund job and I'm going to be a full-time actress. And she was like, she literally sent me to a life coach and was like, over my dead body.
Help her.
That much for college. Like, this is bad. Did you ever go to IO?
I did, yeah.
Did you ever meet Sharna Halpern?
Oh, I know Sharna.
Oh my God, Sharna's like, so humble brag. My dad's younger sister was on the first ever Herald team in Chicago, and she and Sharna and Del Close were best friends.
Whoa!
So
impressive.
I am like a little bit of improv nepo baby.
It's
Not
in your
that
blood.
It really did anything for me, but at one point, because I'd gone through UCB, and then I met Sharna for the first time, and she invited me to go to come to Chicago and go through IO. But at that point, I was like married and in my early 30s, and my husband was like, "No." What? You're just gonna move by yourself to Chicago to do more improv when you're already not getting paid? He was like, I don't think this is a good idea.
He's like, you're gonna go play make believe?
More? You're doing it more away from me after I'm like paying for your entire life?
He's like, what about that hedge fund job?
I know. But anyway, oh my God, so amazing. So you know Sharna, so you're in Chicago, you're doing improv.
Yeah, so I did something called comedy studies. So I finished my degree. It was like this study abroad program at Second City. And then after that program, they hired me, which was awesome. And I stayed and was like working there and met incredible people, incredible friends. Like it truly changed my life. And as you know, like the circuit there is pretty small. So you kind of meet everybody that's in the scene. And so I did IO, I did Annoyance. I did the Second City thing. And then, I was there for, I don't even know how many years, maybe 6 or so. And I was, sorry about my dog.
That's okay. What kind? Who is your dog? What kind?
His name is Theo. He's a rescue. He'll calm down. There's somebody walking past. He's a rescue. They told me I got him when he was 4 months old. He just looked like a scruffy little pup. And they told me he was a golden retriever. And I was I was just in college, like, okay, golden retriever. He's not. He's like a little terrier, and he's still like 25 pounds, and that was 9 years ago. Not even close.
So, that's hilarious.
They saw me coming, and they're like, we'll get her. Watch this. He's a golden retriever. And I was like, okay. So he might make an appearance.
Oh, we love that. We're dog friendly on this podcast. Children friendly. Anything going on in the background, we love it.
All things friendly.
Yes.
Great. So I did the whole Second City thing, and look, like my friends were so talented. A lot of them went on to SNL and became writers, and now, write and act in sitcoms and like are just really doing it. And my life took a turn. My very first day of comedy studies, my first acting teacher said to the whole class, well, you're all here because you're comedians and you're fucked up in some way. And I was like, I'm not fucked up. Like, what's this man talking about? And then slowly over time, I was like, oh, I am. So pretty fucked up. So I got into therapy. I was so lucky. I found an incredible therapist, and started seeing her and like realizing like, oh, actually a lot of what I learned was not healthy, was pretty toxic the way I grew up. And a lot of my beliefs, don't serve me anymore and never did. And so my friends went on, stayed on the comedy path. And I kind of dove really deeply into my own healing, which was not fun, and very hard and gruesome and brutal and messy. And I was 22. And then I left Second City, ran off to Alaska, because that's what
What?
you do. I know. Plot twist.
Wait, well, what's interesting is I think a lot of performers, so I was an actress in New York for 14 years and I did comedy and all that. So I was like fully, I like kept the path while like healing and therapy and all kinds of getting sick and going back to school and doing nutrition stuff. And I think it's amazing because I think a lot of actors are, I think it's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had a casting director once say to me in a general, I did an audition. She goes, straight faced, you're funny and you're pretty. You must have had a really fucked up childhood.
You're the most messed up.
She's like, because pretty girls aren't funny. You don't have to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wish more actors would maybe take your path is what I'm going to say. Because I think a lot of people are drawn to that business because of pain that they don't know how to process, or I mean, for me, I can see where it was. I needed to heal, and it was a way for me to like become embodied, totally understand my emotions, have permission to express them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to apply. I think it's really fast. I'm the same type of person where it's like, ooh, I'm more interesting on the inside. I'm going to just keep digging because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I love that because I think and you end up with a lot of really incredible, interesting, self-actualized people. And this is like in your early 20s that you're like diving deeply into this. That's incredible. So what brought you to Alaska?
I was like having a quarter life crisis and was like, I'm so depressed, but I didn't know I didn't, growing up, we weren't taught about like emotions and how to emote and what feelings mean and how to express. I was not taught any of that. And actually like the family I come from, they pretty firmly held on to the belief that like therapy is for quacks is what my dad would always, and I was like, okay. So I felt a lot of shame around that, but so
mine was therapy just makes you hate your mom. My mom was like, don't go to therapy. They just make you hate
You'll hate me.
You'll hate me. And then at one point I was like interested in being a therapist, and she goes, no, it's the worst. People just complain to you about their problems all day long. Like that's going to be the worst job. You don't want to do that. And I was like, oh.
Okay. Guess I'll keep acting.
I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just like so depressed and knew I could do the Second City like comedy thing, but it's like, it just wasn't ready. I wasn't fully baked. I didn't know who I was. I was not embodied, like you were saying. It was just, I was kind of like doing the surface level thing. And so, yeah, I ran off to Alaska and like was just in the woods, like fucking, I don't even know, like camping. And then I came back to Chicago. I had to get rescued. It was a whole thing, okay?
You had to get rescued?
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
I love, like, how did you end up in, like, you're like, I don't know, I was just in Alaska, like, camping and shit. I'm like, what?
Kind of impulsive. I was like, I have to leave. And then...
Were you alone? Did you meet other people? How did you know how to be camping in Alaska? I mean, I grew up in Maine, and I wouldn't be like, I know how to go camping in Alaska. That feels like a lot more extreme.
Totally extreme. You'll learn. You'll learn more as we get to know each other.
Okay, great.
It's gotten better over time. My brother had been there he's a wildlife biologist. And so thank God he was like, you don't seem well. Like, why don't you just come here and like, we'll just be out in nature. And I was like, ooh. Okay. So I guess when you're that depressed, right? Like if you're actually having to survive, like there are grizzlies out there. We encountered them. Like I was like, oh, I'm thankful for my life.
And was the depression because you had done sort of this inner work? Do you feel like you're predisposed to it? Was it because you were like not on the right path? Like where do you think it was coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I'm of the firm belief like there's a little seed that is planted in our soul from the very beginning. And I was doing all the things I thought I should be doing. I was trying to do the art thing, but I didn't know I was an artist. And so I was like constantly kind of dismissing what I truly wanted. And I don't think I even knew what I really wanted. So I think I was caught in this kind of really tough spot of everybody thinks I'm crazy. I really love this, but what am I going to do with it? So maybe I should become a teacher. Maybe I should become a nurse. Like, I think I just was so confused and lost. Mm-hmm. And living in the shoulds, which, I was like, I don't want to I don't want to work at a bank. No, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I was like, what do you mean retirement? Like, I just want to like make stuff, like be outside.
Play with my friends.
Exactly.
I mean, you gave me goosebumps when you said the thing about the seed planted, because I resonate so deeply with that thought. And I know, I mean, I went for it. I did. I was like, there was a part of me that was louder than my shoulds, but that also, like, I ended up with like so many women who aren't very nice to themselves, who aren't fully embodied. I ended up with an autoimmune disease in my late 20s. Yeah, it was super fun. And that's how I became a health coach, because I just sort of dig my way out of a hole of my own making and society and shoulds. But right. Yeah. And so much of that was me feeling one way and doing another because of the dichotomy between your heart and your head.
Yes.
And so, yeah, depression. I couldn't understand more, but I was not as cool as you, and I did not run off to Alaska. I just took more acting classes.
Right, of course. Well, our stories are actually really similar. So I did come back to Chicago, and when I came back, I was like, I was of this belief again, like maybe I'll go to med school. Oh my God, like what a joke. The biggest joke of all time. I can't do math. I don't even want to know how to do math, and like science. But I was like, let me just start volunteering at a hospital. So I started volunteering at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. And actually I worked on this, on the cancer floor with pediatrics. And these were the kids that were there for like a very long time, like months at a time, had really severe cancer. And I noticed there was a day that a magician came in, and the kids that needed to see the magician the most weren't allowed to because of risk of infection. So I was like, this is crazy. These kids need interaction and to be social. And so I asked my supervisor, can I just do improv? Like, can I just try it? I'll just put on a suit and like, I don't need any props. The risk of infection is so low. Can I just try it? And she was like, yeah, whatever. And then it worked. So it kind of became this like Patch Adams like type thing, if you've seen that movie. And I loved it. Like I loved it. And the kids loved it. And we would go nuts. So then I started telling my Second City friends, like, come with me, like we could do this together. And then I really kind of had this epiphany of like, I want to turn this into something. Like, I want to do this. I want to perform for people who want it and need it. And like to get a laugh from a kid who's dying of cancer.
Oh my God.
And their parents, right? Is like, that's a laugh. That's a real laugh.
That's like the most important laugh. I've never even thought about that. Like that visual imagery and that feeling in my body just now is so evocative.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And we had so much fun, so through the volunteering, kids started sharing their stories with me, like, oh, I have to get an amputation in 3 weeks, or I have 6 months to live, or parents or caregivers, whomever, or even staff would pull me aside and like share things. So then I was like, oh, I need to know how to hold these stories. Like I need to know how to tend to them. And that's actually what sent me back to grad school to become a therapist. And that's kind of how I went on that path. And then much like you, actually, I got really sick. It was like so much trauma therapy, my own trauma therapy, like clinicals, in school full time, working 3 jobs, like kind of trying to do the acting thing, but not really. Just being a struggling artist, like sleeping on my friends' couches. And I got really, really sick and got diagnosed with Lyme disease and all this other stuff.
So was it actually Lyme disease? Because how there's like a lot of funny like, oh, is it auto? You know what I mean? Not that I know, but what's your sense around that?
I did the test, the Lyme test. It did come back positive, but to be honest with you, looking back, I think I was deep in my own trauma work. Yeah. I was deep in grad school full time. I was literally working 3 jobs. I had this nasty stomach bug that wrecked me. And then I got vaccinated to go do some work in Malawi in Africa. At the same time, I had this stomach disease. I think all of it combined,
too much,
destroyed me.
Wait, pause. Why were you going to Malawi?
You're like, this time Malawi ran off again?
and how old are you at this point? You're so casual, and you're like, I casually was camping in Alaska, and then I was going to Malawi.
I know. I'm like sleeping on couches, and I'm like, but then I'm going to go to Africa.
But I'm not going to Malawi. You're the most interesting woman in the world. Okay, keep going. So, how old were you, and why are you casually going to Malawi?
I went to Malawi because after Alaska, actually, I was sitting in the airport. Like, am I going to go back to Chicago? Like, what am I doing? I had like a 16-hour layover because I was so broke. I booked one of those flights.
Yes.
And I got a call from this place in upstate New York called the Omega Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you know it.
I do.
And they were like, hey, we have an opening for a women's leadership intensive. Would you want to come? And I was like,
and all I have to get on their list. That seems pretty badass.
I think I impulsively did that at like 3 a.m. one night, like applied and forgot that I did it and was like, oh yeah. And so
I have so much space I have extra energy. I'm healthy. I have so much space in my schedule. Hell yes, I'm going to go to Malawi right
looked
now.
Like a swamp creature, you know, like, yeah, women's leadership. So I went to that conference and met incredible women. And one of the women there was a global health and medicine doctor. And she was awesome and so funny. So we clicked immediately. And she has an organization called Women Together. And she does incredible work with women all over the world. And so she was like, why don't you come with me and like do some of your Humor for Hope stuff, which is, I guess I forgot that. I started a nonprofit in the middle of all this, where we use comedy as a form of therapy. So
how old are you when this is happening?
I think I was 24 when I officially started Humor for Hope.
That's incredible. You're starting a nonprofit at 24.
Yeah.
I'm just going to recognize that. That's incredible. I'm getting drunk and like bartending part-time and like
I was too.
And like just being chaotic.
It's okay. I was too. That was still happening with all my comedy friends until like 5 a.m. But yeah, so I started that and she was like, come do it with me in Malawi, like work with these women and help them tell their stories. And so, yeah. I forgot where we are in this. My life is
You're going
insane.
to Malawi. Oh, your body was falling apart. We were talking about like you getting sick because you were doing everything plus digging deep within your trauma.
Everything. Yeah. So the Lyme disease thing became a thing. I had my last semester of grad school was like, I was so sick. Like, and mine was, it was in my body for sure. Like aches and pains and like, I would get this thing called rhabdo. It's like where your muscles actually swell up and then it's just, you become like the Hulk and then you have to go to the hospital. And I was getting this stuff like all the time.
Oh my God.
I was just in so much pain. I was so fatigued. Like I look back at pictures and I'm like, oh, she was really sick. Like, oh, it was so bad. But mine was more neurological too. So the way that I knew like, oh, I'm really sick is I had my clinical director, I was working at a children's psych hospital. She said, can you go take this to my office? And I'd been working there for a year. And I was like, yeah. And she just found me wandering the halls. I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I can't remember. I don't remember anything. Like where I am, how to write notes. Like I couldn't write anything. I was trying to put like my phone charger in my seatbelt, you know, like to buckle my seatbelt. Like I thought I had Alzheimer's. Like it was insane.
God.
So
that's so scary.
It was awful. And thank God for my friends. Like they really took care of me. They were really great to me. Thank God. Mm-hmm. But that's actually what led me to the psychedelics. So I mean, we can get into that if you want.
Yeah. No, I'm so fascinated by that whole world. And I think it's really exciting what's happening in terms of therapy and the use of psychedelics and healing these days. But is because of your own healing journey, that's sort of what led you there? Like trying to help with what was going on neurologically, or was this something you were just interested in? Like what was the draw?
Yeah. Okay. So I have another plot twist for you.
Not surprised.
Act 3. Okay. I got so sick of that job that I had to go on medical leave. And as you may know, maybe not, like you get paid nothing on medical leave. It was like less than $200 a week. And so I was like, there's no way I can afford to stay in Chicago.
Right.
So I got crazy and I ran off to live on a commune in Costa Rica.
So were you like, okay, rent's a little expensive. We're late night 3 a.m. Googling again. It's like, what's a better, do I sell pictures of my feet? No, I don't want to do that. Am I going to sell my egg? No. Ooh, commune. Like, how did this happen?
Are you in my brain?
I mean, I had those moments where I was like, I don't want another bartending job. I'm like, should I sell my eggs for $8,000? And every time I was like, don't do it.
Been there. Pretty much,
man. It's a deep fucking hole.
There's wild stuff out there, and I found it. How did I find? Yeah, of course. Yes, I looked at all those things. Another plot twist. Very randomly, at some point in between all this, went to a conference in Santa Fe on death and dying, and couldn't afford to stay on campus, so I couch surfed with this guy that I didn't know. And I was like, please don't kill me. And he was like, I'm not going to kill you.
You are braver than most people I know. I feel like I'm pretty brave, and you're like tenfold braver than I am.
Looking back, I would call it reckless and unsafe. But, I'm still here, thank God. He was like, I won't kill you. I'm a therapist. And I was like, oh, me too. I'm training to be a therapist too. And we actually became incredible friends. He's this like wild, free spirit hippie in Taos. And so I texted him and was like, I need to get out of here. I'm very sick. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know of any place that's like kind of off the grid and where I can really heal? And he was like, yeah, go to this place. And they had a work exchange, so I could stay for free if I worked and cooked in the kitchen with the local ladies. So I was like, okay. And I lived in a tent for 6 months.
Wow. And did you heal?
I think it started my healing. How do I say this? Yeah, it helped me start to heal in a different way. Like, it wasn't just talk therapy anymore, which I'm so grateful for. And I still see my same therapist, but this was like on this commune, it was like everything was so slow. There was no place to be. Yes. We weren't rushing. It was like, in order to stay there, you had to do these healing workshops, and it was all inner child stuff, family constellation stuff. Like,
wow, that's kind of perfect.
Yes.
And like truly. So kismet. That's so wild.
Yes.
Like, you are on your journey, like whatever you believe in. Whenever stuff like that happens, it's like, ooh, you're getting like a wink from whoever telling you to, that's so cool.
I believe it too.
So you had to do all these like inner child healings.
So much. And that's like all we were doing. And then I have always also been of the belief, like I didn't want to seek out psychedelics. I didn't know a ton about them. Mm-hmm. I just felt like if it's meant for me, it will find me. This is how I live my life. And two friends there were like, hey, there's an opening. The shaman is coming at this other place in Costa Rica. We can't go. There's 2 spots. And me and a new friend of mine, who's like a lifelong friend now, she was also living there. We were like, we have to go. We have to go to the ceremony. Like, and so we hitchhiked and we went, and it was an ayahuasca ceremony. And, oh my God, it wrecked me to the core, and it changed my life. So there was so much that happened for me in those 3 days. Like, just the release in my body, and like the visions that I was getting of like my DNA being altered, and like family lineages and like patterns being broken. And I didn't know any of this stuff. I was like, here's what I saw last night. And they were all like, girl, that's powerful. Witnessing my own death and rebirth. And I mean, it was really brutal, but I walked out of that being like, that was 20 years of therapy in one night.
Wow.
So that's really what sent me down this other path where like I still do the talk therapy. I have clients where I do talk therapy, but I mean, as you know, right? Like, this stuff lives in our bodies.
Oh gosh. Yes.
It's so deep in us. Yes. I was reading something just the other day about we have up to 7 to 14 generations in our bodies that we carry with us. Like, there's just so much.
I believe. Well, it's really interesting because I've been in a really, I mean, much like you in my own way, very interested in healing. And well, it was funny during the pandemic. Yeah, I always had Well, I think you grow up a certain way, right? And you have no idea because it's just you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I got really in, and then with acting, because I came out of my childhood really feeling like I had a great childhood, and I did in like a lot of ways. I really did. But then I was like in New York City, depressed. I had bulimia, I had anxiety and depression, and I was like a disaster. And I was like, wait, I thought I had a great childhood. And then we started to uncover all of this trauma that was unique to me being a really sensitive kid, and like through the layers, thank God, through therapy, through acting classes and conservatory, and just like digging deeper, you get, you start to learn yourself more. And then of course, much like you, I got rock bottom with my health. And then that was like, because I didn't grow up religious or anything like that, but that started to be like a spiritual awakening for me, where I started, like, it was embodiment, right? Where it's like, whoa, you have two different voices, and there's just one that you don't listen to. You don't even like yourself. You think you're stupid, like you're mean and gross and fat and all the mean things I would say to myself. So of course I wasn't ever listening or trusting it. And because they didn't know what I had. And so I was seeing like a number of different doctors, and I had the thing that every woman has, I think, in like a combination of like fatigue, hormone imbalance, PCOS, gut issues, tons of inflammatory issues. My hair was falling out, fatigue. So it was like this, everything, like parts of everything. And I was seeing all these different doctors, and they're like, I don't know, take a pill or come back in a year.
How many people said to you, like, well, do you think you're just about to start your period?
Oh my God.
All the time.
Or like, is it really that bad? Or I think you just need to go on antidepressants.
Yeah, I think you're just stressed.
Or you should go back on birth control. There's a lot of that. Go back on birth control, get on antidepressants, just stop eating these things, exercise more.
Yeah.
It's in your head.
Yeah.
It was just like so much. And luckily I did grow up in the woods with hippies. So my mom and dad were like, can you maybe not try to take a bunch of pharmaceuticals? Like that's maybe not the thing.
Yeah.
But in that, like, it was such an interesting, like, spiritual awakening, which was really wild, because that's when I started to, like, things started magically happening one thing after the other. But it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I really got to the point where, like, I had done everything that I thought I wanted. Like, I had lived my life out, like, through my brain 100%. Like, I'd done a lot through my body and healed, but it was still like an idea of a life.
Yeah.
And then when I realized, like, I had done so much healing because I thought that it was me. And it was like, oh, this is just not the life and the career and the relationship and the city. Like, this is just not, you're not supposed to be here doing this anymore.
Yeah.
It was really interesting, because then I started to like jump off the abyss and like really free fall into like life just carrying me. And with that, I started to realize and I started to do more somatic therapy for the first time in my life. I'd only ever done talk therapy. And I'd done a lot of somatic stuff because I've taken like 8 million improv classes, and and acting, and I've been a cow, and like, you're like doing all this weird shit with your body and like voice and but it was the first time I started working with, and it was one of those things that he sort of came out of nowhere. And he was like an acupuncturist, but he had invented this thing called emotional consolidation, which I think, I've never done EMDR, but it's a lot of like feeling into your emotions and like feeling them up, and then allowing your emotions to populate your mind, like your subconscious. And it was wild because I was getting all these rashes, and it was during COVID, and like 3 people recommended him. So I did like an intake, and it was so interesting because he was like, you have a lot of trauma, so we'll just like work through your divorce. And it was funny because I just decided to quit acting, but it was such a big part of my identity that I had to like see a therapist to let go of it.
Of course.
As you do, right? So we were working through like my divorce, we were working through my acting trauma, but it was interesting because after a few months, because it was all led by my body, he would just have me like lay down first it was on Zoom, and then we started seeing each other in person when we were able to, but he would just have me feel into my feelings and let them get bigger in my body, and then just whatever happened in my brain. And then he would teach me how to either process, or there were certain techniques he had with like anger and sadness. And I was really good at it because I was an actor. And it was so funny because I didn't realize how much, I didn't understand what was going on. But the first time it happened, do you remember in an acting class where like, don't use your memories? Like you're doing a really intense scene and they're like, don't use your memories because like you rehearse enough and the memory's gone and you won't cry.
Yeah. You
so
have to like,
I did that obviously in my 20s because like you're like, this is way easier to think about my ex-boyfriend than to do like, I like went to the Atlantic Theater Conservatory. So they had this whole other like much more heady, like think of an as if and it's in the future and all these things. I was like, I'm going to just cry about my ex-boyfriend.
Of
but
course.
then you get on stage and the memory's like neutralized because you felt it so many times.
Yeah.
So it was this really interesting like connection where I was like, whoa, this is the same muscle I used to act badly with, essentially.
Perfect.
With. But after about 3 or 4 months of working with him, I had this one session where I was like, I feel all this anger and we couldn't find anywhere in my life that it came from. Like nowhere. And then I remember like almost like opening this box and it was like pure white rage. And I remember I sat up and I was terrified. I was like, this is not from anything in my life. I've never even felt anything like this. And he's so funny because he's this really cool, like middle-aged Chinese guy. He's like kind of funny and very serious, like from California. And he just was like, oh, we've tapped into past life trauma. I was like, the fuck?
So calm.
Everything had been so like clinical
Good day.
And normal. And I was like, you mean what? And it was funny because he didn't get too weird about it. He's like, listen, who knows what this is actually from? This is stored in your body. It's generational.
Yeah.
So like whatever, let your emotional body populate your brain in whatever story it wants to come up with, and then we'll just process it. And it was so insane because I laid on this massage table and it looked like I was having an exorcism for the better part of an hour.
Yeah. And did you let yourself like feel it and release it?
Are you kidding? I was an actor for 14 years. I will do anything in any situation. Do you know how much money I've paid to be like complete? I will cry. I'll take my clothes off. Like I do not give a shit. So here I am, like literally like laying around and like, it's just like fucking wild. And I sat up and I was so embarrassed.
Was he in the room with you?
He was just sitting quietly in the corner, and I'm just like, and I sat up, and he was like, "Good job." I'm humiliated,
job well
but
done.
It was so crazy because it had a lot to do with like throat and fear and using my voice. I swear to God, I left that day, and I went from 30 plus years of only taking up this much space in the world, and it felt like I was infinite, and I was like, I don't know what just happened. But my life changed. And then that like very much later, like my business took off. Like it was really wild.
Yeah.
And then from then we continued to go on. But like after that, I was like, oh, this is like a whole nother level of healing. Sorry, I totally hijacked this conversation.
No, it's so important. And I'm glad you shared it. I that was kind of how my ayahuasca experience was. Like mine didn't set in until everybody else was done with their session, and was like having breakfast. And I was like, I didn't feel anything all night, like whatever. And then it started for me while they're eating chia pudding. I'm like losing my fucking mind on a mat in the corner, screaming, like couldn't breathe, was contorting. And like, I just had to like break through it. And it was terrifying. And it sounds kind of like what you were
so
describing.
Scary.
Terrifying, right?
Scary.
Like but it's so important. I always tell my clients now, I kind of see it as like, we are these blank canvases where all this shit gets splattered all over us. Our parents, society, media, television, like all of it, right? And then it's like, if we're lucky enough to be able to have the privilege to spend our lives like shedding those layers, when you get to the root, like when you get to the core of who you are, like I've uncovered my power. Like, here I am, I'm home. Yes. And it is like nothing I've ever experienced. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of what you were like,
it was
here I am.
Yeah, it was. And I look back and I've had moments, but that was like the first big one. And then things have escalated in really good ways from that. Because I started doing Joe Dispenza's work.
Nice.
And because I started to realize like things had healed in my body and then getting divorced totally and like quitting acting. And like, I just took everything that was safe and comfortable and I knew for the first 35 years of my life and then like broke it into a million pieces.
Wow.
So of course there was like a large and like literally the year before the pandemic. I was like separated from my husband who we had been together for 10 years. I was like doing all kinds of weird and then the pandemic, and it was like the perfect storm of like all kinds of crazy shit. But
so much like letting go for you.
Oh my God.
Severing.
everything. Like I literally, like my life is a certain way until I was like right before I turned, I would say like 35 and a half. And then I've started a brand new life since then and it's been incredible. And it was so interesting because up until that point, I felt like I had gotten to this point where like I felt a little bit like I was like suffocating from the inside and like I was losing time. And like I was aging, you know, I was just like, and of course, being an actress in your 30s, you just feel like you're so obsolete and old and disgusting and like.
Yeah, you go from playing like, oh, I can play a 25-year-old to that. Now they're sending you mom roles, and you're like,
I know. Oh yeah, you're not. That's like happening at 29, but it's like bad.
I know.
But it was really interesting because I've not like since then. I feel like I got more truly on my path, and it's like every second feels interesting and incredible. But then you start to realize the deeper the work you do, like I started getting into like emotional understanding, like my emotional addiction, like what was my like what was making up my personality through his work. And when you start to look at like where you sit emotionally all the time and like observe yourself on that level, it is so wild because I realized my brain was causing the stress and my anxious thoughts and how I thought about certain things and the things I was afraid of. Yeah. That was the core of what was making me sick this time. Yeah. And when you know that, right, I'm like, well, this is crazy. Like, I'm making my insides bleed literally by the thoughts I'm thinking and the way I'm programmed. So I started to take that apart. And like, that has been the most wild journey over the past few years because because I was meditating like 2 hours a day. Nice. And I was like going to his retreats and doing all this stuff. And I had the craziest thing happen to me a couple months ago where I started, and I actually love your opinion on this because I was like, I've either lost my mind or I've spent so much time creating these new neural pathways that at one point, it was almost like a foot in like who I was and my personality from before that I knew since childhood and who I had started to create over the past couple of years. And there was almost like a reckoning where I had to fully let go. And I was like, I've meditated and created like a new baseline that like I almost felt like I outgrew my personality and a part of me died. And it was like incredibly beautiful and wild. But what happened was it felt like because I was in hypervigilance for so long that I finally turned the switch completely off. And it was like almost like I had removed my nervous system or that I had like turned a loud radio that was playing in the back of my forever just off. Yeah. And it was so wild because this happened to me in November. I physically feel different. I'm digesting food differently. I feel differently in my body. I didn't know you could feel this good. Yeah. I did not know that like this was an option and the amount of like peace and happiness. It's bizarre. But I was like, did I accidentally like meditate as hard as I could into like a new body? So anyway, what is your professional opinion of this?
You're like, I went hard in the paint and like now I'm a new person.
I literally was like, I was like, I think I just outgrew myself. Like I started to see all these patterns and like nothing that I used to cope before worked. Yeah. Like all of my coping mechanisms were gone. And all of a sudden, like everything is coming from within in a really beautiful way.
I mean, well, actually, let me say this. Isn't it such a testament, though, of like, we are taught that so many of these things are outside of us. And so much of the healing is like learning our own minds and bodies. Yes. Like, what is living in me and what are the thoughts that I'm circling around that are actually making me sick, that aren't accurate and aren't mine anymore?
Well, that's why I got so excited about like when I went to IAN to be a health coach because it was one of those things where I realized everything was related to my microbiome. So I just like, it was like choose your own adventure, do as much reading as you can as like a drunk 26-year-old to like figure out your life. And it worked, but that's like the whole idea of epigenetics. Yes. Right? Where it was like, well, of course I'm sick. I'm so mean. Yes. I'm so mean to myself.
Yeah. Right. Like you were okay, based on the story you just shared, a few things are coming up. Like, do you think, and I'm just guessing here, so this might not land, so tell me, but like, is part of was part of the shift for you? Like you were no longer the voice saying the thing. You were now able, the thing that's able to like hear it and receive it, and it actually didn't serve you anymore. So like you actually did outgrow that part of yourself and
I mean,
stepped
that
into
happened
like
years ago. This is like literally like a physically different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I like the voice stuff that happened. That was a moment. That was like my brain exploded. I remember reading Michael Singer's book in like my 20s and being like, what? Huh? I'm not these things? What?
I mean, meditation is honestly, to be really truthful with you, and actually I want to say this too about the psychedelic piece. Like I think a lot of people think that it's a cure-all, right? Like, well, if I just do a big ceremony or, do a macro dose of whatever, like it will cure me or I'll be a different person, and like, actually that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so important to have a practice to hold it, a container to be with it and integrate it. And I'll say now too, like, I actually don't even do psychedelics that often myself anymore. Yeah. My meditation practice is the medicine for me.
Same. I went to a few Joe Dispenzas and I felt different. Like I saw, like it helped heal part of my, like it's a wild experience for anyone who's ever curious. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever done in my life, especially the first time you go, because you spend a week with like 1,700 people who are meditating on like love essentially.
Yeah.
And being in that energy, like unbelievable stuff happens. Like that was the first time I felt like, whoa, my nervous system kind of reset in this weird way. And I felt different from then. But then I doubled down because it was such a beautiful healing experience where I physically saw changes in my body that I was like, this is too beautiful. I'm going to go for it. Yeah. And for 2 years I did. And it culminated in like a huge shift that I did not see coming, that like rocked my world and has created the most interesting shift I've ever had, that like happened not on drugs during the day, like on a Monday. It was so wild. But and it's interesting here because I live in Portugal, in Lisbon. And there's a lot of people here. There's a big community of people here who are like and I'm sure you can find this anywhere, right? Where it's like, oh, we're just always kind of on mushrooms. Or I would see it at Joe Dispenza where people go all of the time chasing the high and not integrating.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about your meditation practice. Like, what do you do? What's your medicine?
So I actually got really lucky. I also lived in Guatemala for a while. Like after Costa Rica, whatever, I ran off. I went on a silent retreat and then I just was like, oh, I love it here. I want to stay.
How long? What kind? Was it like a Vipassana type of thing, or
this silent retreat was a 10-day, and it was over Christmas and New Year, and it's like right on a volcano. It was so beautiful, but they kind of pulled from a lot of different modalities and like techniques, and so it wasn't like purely Vipassana, but it was a silent, retreat, and I just started doing that every year, and then I just started staying, and then over COVID, I was like, I'm just going to stay here. But I was at this place where I knew I need a teacher. Like I've been my own guide in some ways, which was okay, but like I need a teacher now. And so I just put it out there, and someone told me when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And the first night that I went, when I got to this retreat center, the lady who runs it came up to me and was like, hey, I was staying in the dorm, and she was like, hey, just so you know, be quiet because someone just came out of a dark retreat, like a cave retreat.
Oh, wow. Have you done that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. I talked to you for like 30,000 hours.
Forever. We're going to talk.
Oh my God. Wait. Okay, wait, keep going. Well, we can come back to that.
Okay. And so I went into the dorm and it was dark and this woman had just come out. So I was, giving her space and quiet. And then she was just like, hey, I was like, oh my gosh, like, how are you? How was it? Like, we just started chatting. And then her husband went in when she came out. So she was just at the retreat center for like the next 10 days waiting for him. And so she and I started hanging out. And later, this was like months later, I get an email from her and we all hung out, the two of them and myself. And they were wonderful people, just like enlightened beings, when you meet somebody that you're like, oh,
yeah,
this is something different.
Yeah.
I got an email from her several months later and was like, hey, I would love for you to join me on this retreat. And I was like, oh, wait a second, she's leading it. And then I was like, oh, wait a second, this woman is like the real deal spiritual teacher, like left Insight in California because she was like, we need to talk more about like dismantling like colonialism and racism and all the things within this. And like, it needs to be more accessible. And she was incredible. So she has become my teacher now.
Wow.
So I do a lot.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2018.
Okay, cool.
That started. So I follow her pretty closely, and she's more like tantric Buddhism. You know, it's like very embodied. It really incorporates the body, but I still do a lot of Vipassana stuff. I just came back from a 10-day over Christmas. So my meditation practices now, I try to an hour in the morning, an hour at night. It doesn't always happen, of course, you know, but something clicked for me in this last retreat where I was like, oh, it's just living the practice now. Yeah. It's not this militant, like I have to sit down and I have to sit up and it's like, I'm living it when I'm walking my dog. I'm living it when I'm at the red light, when I'm doing the dishes, when it's just here all the time. And that to me feels like real freedom.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Let's shift back into psychedelics a little bit because that's such an interesting space these days. And I want to, I really like sort of celebrating and exploring alternative modalities on this. So I would love to just talk a little bit about you integrating it into your practice, what that looks like, if there are any cool results or interesting stories you'd like to share about that.
Yeah, you know, it's still kind of a wonky field, you know, being a therapist. And
well, is it because like I bet the legality in different places is kind of like all over the place. So yes, do you feel free sharing what you're comfortable with sharing.
You know, look, I'll be really honest with you. Like I think a lot of this field and people may disagree and that's fine, is rooted in a lot of like supremacy and colonialism. And like there's a lot of
therapy,
stuff that
you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, therapy. And so there are things that I've seen that work for people. And so I'm going to go with that, right? Like if somebody's like, I don't have words, but I'm going to move and dance and whatever, or create fucking weird art, or, you know, psychedelics has helped me, or going and sitting in the dirt somewhere, or being with indigenous, like, fine, let's do that. Yeah. So, you know, with the legality around psychedelics, it's been a little weird. And of course it's different than like in Chicago than it is in like Colorado. But, after my own experience, I was just like, oh, I'm a believer. Like something has happened that was not able to be accessed in any other way that I had found. Yeah. Maybe if I had done like breath work or, you know, meditation or something for sure. But, I would say now, you know, as I can, you know, with the people who feel like it's right for them. And there's a very extensive intake process that I have people go through, of course, because it's not for everybody, right? Like I would never want to harm somebody or dysregulate them more, fragment them. And I believe like you have to be really careful, really careful. It's also sacred. So I've been very lucky in that a few elderly indigenous women like really took me under their wings and have just taught me so much. They've been so gracious and helped heal me too as a healer. So, really it's so much more than just the psychedelics. It's the ceremony, it's the ritual, it's the, how are we connecting back to the land? It's the, creating a safe space and environment. It's the, how am I getting free to help others get free? It's like going back to the indigeneity of it and like the rematriation and, like taking care of our planet and each other. So, you know, with me, it doesn't look like you're going to come into like a sterile office space and like wear an eye mask and I'm just going to hold your hand. But we really get weird and like get into it. So, I love it. I always wanted like a grandmotherly figure to like, you know, I wish I love my grandmothers, they have passed, but I wish I'd had like this witchy I wish Stevie Nicks had been like one of my grandmothers, you know,
Yes.
who was like, yeah, come, like, let's do this. I'll show you. But I found them, you know, I found them in other women. And so I found her in other women. So, you know, I've had clients who are like, I need to fucking rage right now.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's rage, you know, whatever. And I'm a firm believer too. Like I had somebody say one time, like this, I feel silly. Like I'm scared to do it by myself in terms of like really getting into the emotional release and raging and like crying. And I was like, would it help you if I do it with you? You know? So like, I'll get down on the floor with you. Like, what do you need? Do we need to dance like crazy? Do we need to go scream at the stars? Like, what do you want to do? Let's do it.
Oh, you're the best. So when you were saying, you know, there's a long intake for, do you have, and someone's listening and they're maybe interested, are there people who automatically you would say don't do it, or people who, could you give a maybe profile of someone it might be good for, or situations it might be good for?
Yeah, of course, there's like a lot of contraindications, right? If you're on certain medications
Yes.
that we need to weed out and be really careful and mindful of. Schizophrenia can be really, right now in terms of the field and science and data, it's a no-no. Like you don't want to like further fragment somebody. Bipolar, there is some more research that's being done, but in terms of mania, like if that's in someone's history, it's advised against. And that's, they say within like your immediate family and how do I say this? Like one step outside of your immediate family. So if that's like your uncle or your cousins or your aunt, you would want to be really careful with that. And then of course too, right? Like I take into account, like, where is somebody in their life? Do you have time and space and energy to integrate and process this? Do you have somebody to help you hold it? You know, are you going to do the session and then like jump right back into your job that's suffocating you? Or, you know, you walk in and it's like you're a single parent with 3 kids. Like, I think it's important to be really mindful of like when, where, how, with who. And then of course the set and setting, as most people probably know.
Yeah.
So.
And do people do multiple sessions over time, or is it kind of different for everyone?
Yeah, I feel into it with everybody. If people are looking to do like, I've had different folks, right? Like, so some people like, I just want a mystical experience. I've never believed in anything. Like, I don't know anything outside of myself. I want to feel connected to the world. That's one thing. And then there's folks who are like, I'm trying to heal my trauma and like generational trauma. Like I need help breaking these patterns. For folks like that, I often do more than one session and we feel into it, right? Like I would never blast somebody off and then be like, okay, in 2 weeks, let's do it again. Like not how I work. I try to view everything through a trauma lens and like working with the nervous system. So it's I kind of tailor it more so to like what people need and what's safest for them. Yeah.
And how long have you been practicing in this way?
I started working with it in 2015.
Oh, wow. So quite yeah. Wow.
I mean, just kind of on my own, you know, and there's, so I wouldn't say I'm not an expert. I'm still learning, of course, but
I don't feel, it seems like no one is though, right? It feels very new in a really exciting way. And are there any sort of trends or patterns or things that you see that it helps people with the most? Or are there any like surprising where you're like, whoa, I did not expect you to like change this much or get this much perspective?
Will you repeat that? It cut out. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just asking if you noticed any sort of trends or patterns or similarities between people who have like psychedelic therapy, or is it just completely bio-individual?
I think it's, from my experience, it's different for everybody, right? Like I could go in and have an experience and someone else's experience is going to be incredibly different. That's usually always the case. I mean, even when we set intentions, sometimes it's like, I really want to focus on this, on like my eating disorder stuff and, you know, whatever. And then it's like, wait a second, I had all this stuff with my mom. that's where it's important to have the integration, right? Of like, actually, is there a connection here?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. But it's not lost on me that, like, there are patterns. So I think something I do see usually is it can just kind of subtly, and also not so subtly, but expand people's lens, of
Yeah.
like, I had someone say, I don't know that it really did that much, but we we were processing afterwards, and they were like, but oh my God, like these flowers are so beautiful. I'm like, oh, the color of the sky. And I was like, okay. So
You're like, it didn't
it's
do anything.
nothing happened. It's like somatic work where people are like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel my body, but they're like sweating and like, but I'm just like clammy and sweating. And it's like, oh, interesting.
No response at all. No response.
Nothing. So that is something it can be really subtle, but it's like, that's where it starts to, like, there's a crack now, and it's like, how do we stay with that? Of like, just noticing the world around us, and like, we are connected to each other, and we do breathe because of plants. Like, this thing is alive. So are you. I think that's maybe the thing I see the most. Yeah.
Yeah. Connection. Right. The bigger connection. Agreed. That's incredible. That's what an incredible thing. If you feel like you got nothing, right. To have more connection and empathy for the earth and each other, and reverence for one another.
Totally.
So if someone is sort of interested, right, they've been doing traditional therapy, they feel stuck. What are first steps, whether it's with you or other people, that you recommend if they feel really called to go down this road?
Yeah, I think first I would say, like, do you feel regulated? Like, are you in a place where this can be healing versus like dysregulating? Mm-hmm. Do you have the kind of space to be able to process it fully? And then I would say find a good clinician, or actually, right, like, I learned because of Indigenous women. So find an Indigenous healer, like find someone that you feel safe with, like your body feels safe with, who you trust, who you can build a rapport with, like, so you can show up fully, whether that's like you're weeping because something's so beautiful in your ceremony, or you're raging, or you're dealing with some past life trauma, or fear is coming up that you're really held, and like, it's going to be okay. I think that's so important, because there's a lot of, reckless things happening, of course. And it's a big thing right now. It's a hot topic. And so everybody's like, oh, I took a weekend course and I have a certificate. And it's like,
right.
Okay, but have you really done the work? Are you safe and regulated in your own body as the person who's sitting, right? Or the therapist or whomever. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, find somebody that you really trust and feel safe with. Yeah.
Well, it's great advice. All right. I could talk to you for like 8 million more years, but I'm going to slowly wrap things up, and I have a couple more questions only.
Ask me.
So I know you have a practice there. You have a number of different therapists within your practice. Can you share a little bit about that? I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and your offerings are with the comedy and the healing. And then anything else you'd like to sort of share, or ways people can connect with you if they've really resonated with you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I do have a practice. It's called Psychosomatica, and right now I have 3 other women working with me. They're awesome. They're just solid women, and believe in doing their own work. And like, we don't do the blank slate thing over here at Psychosomatica, where we're like, well, I'll just sit here and like reflect back to you. That's fine. Maybe it works for some people, but like, we get messy. We're in it, like, I laugh with my clients. I cry with my clients. I mean, I'm not trying to take up their space, but like, it's real care. And
I love that, because I remember, at one point in my 20s, I was in a hard place, and I was so obsessed with knowing things about my therapist. And even when I said, like, you know what I mean, she'd be like, I can't disclose that. And I'm like, be a person with me. And that's why I actually liked becoming a coach, because they always talked about, like, share your story as you're just a few steps ahead of the people you're helping. And you're usually helping people like you. So like, be real with them. And like, I think I would have been a terrible therapist, because I would have been like, oh, I had IBS too. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. As you can see on my podcast, I'm like, I'm going to talk about myself.
You end up paying them for the session.
I know, I'm like crying. They're hugging me.
But actually it's so important. And something we're trying to do in our practice is like decolonize our practice. And what I mean by that is like, if we look at like the characteristics of like white supremacy or, I guess supremacy, it's like individualism, it's quantity over quality, it's power over, it's hierarchical, it's all these things that harm us all. And so we are like moving in these directions of like, we don't even like to call our clients anymore. We just call them participants. Like, I'm just participating with you on your journey, so
beautiful.
We're really like working on that. I mean, it's tough, right? Because we still live in like a capitalistic system, and it's, how do we do this where it's accessible and where we can practice like real collective and community care? Like the Joe Dispenza conference, like it makes sense that was so powerful for you because there's other people being like, yeah, me too. We're all in it together.
Yeah.
Like we're so taught that like, oh, I have this and like something's wrong with me and I'm broken, but nobody else is dealing with it. And it's like, why do you think I became a therapist? What do you mean? Because I was fucking crazy, like depressed, like what? So yeah, that's kind of the direction that we're really trying to head towards now.
That's incredible. And are you all based in Denver? Do you do things remotely? Are you in person? What does that look like?
So right now it's all remote. Like once COVID hit, we all went remote. And so everybody's based in Chicago. I'm in Colorado. I go back and forth for all the things. So I'm in both, but they are all based in Chicago right now. So, and actually one of them is licensed too in Colorado. So I guess there's two of us, but so we see people from all over, it's like, we figure it out. Like if you need sliding scale, we figure it out. Like if somebody asked us recently for a work trade and I was like, we could, let's talk about it,
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God. I say yes to the weirdest shit. I'm like, what do you need? Absolutely. It's cute. My dad was a dentist and like, we have so much weird, not great art in our house because like, he is such, you know what I mean? Like someone needed a root canal and he's a hippie dentist. So he's like, sure. We have an urn that someone made for his ashes with paintings of him doing dental work on it. For
perfect.
Like literally like the weirdest shit.
This is what we always wanted.
I know, like, thank you. But I think that's so incredible. And I think speaks to what you're trying to do, right? Is make it more accessible, like allow people to feel more connected and taken care of. Are there certain things that you guys specialize in, or do you guys just, anyone who needs any sort of like somatic, psychedelic, regular therapy, you guys can pretty much?
I would say the root of like the kind of the basis of all of our work, no matter what kind of modality we're using, is trauma, right? So whether that's like an acute trauma or like past life family trauma, like you're like, I don't know what this is, but it's in me and I feel it and it's affecting my life. Like, we've all got it. We've all got trauma. Like so that's kind of like the root of what we do, but everybody has their own modalities, like internal family systems work or polyvagal nervous system stuff, or more somatic, or the psychedelic or the ketamine assisted therapy. So, we really like all of it. Like if people want to get weird and like, let's do some art therapy and like dance movement, we're like, okay, let's do that.
I love this. This is like the best therapy practice ever. I wish you were around when I was like in therapy all the time in New York. This would have been way better.
Come see us.
And then are you still actively doing stuff with the comedy? I know you're also like still doing comedy and acting. I mean, we didn't even get to really get into that, but like guys, you could hire her. She's obviously like very fun to talk to and hilarious.
We could hire you too.
Knowledgeable. You guys, put us in a movie.
Is this our movie?
I think so.
I think so. So yes, with the Humor for Hope stuff, we've just wrapped up a series of 8 workshops where we're training other clinicians now. So we're using comedy as a form of therapy, and like improv is the main thread. So we're training clinicians and offering CEUs, which is nice.
What's CEU?
Sorry, it's continuing education units within like the therapy world. So like for doctors, it's continuing medical education. So they can get credit, so they have their hours at the end of every year. And then we have some, we're still working on this, with what's happening right now in the Middle East. We're working on something hopefully called a comedy caravan, where we'll go and work with people that have been displaced and, are fleeing. And so, and use the improv and therapy stuff. I don't know when that will be. We're just kind of keeping an eye on things. But I'm working on partnering with a lot of other artists. I'm like really excited about that. I'm so excited about that. And then, yeah, we're like hosting a gala, not our own, someday, I hope, but for another organization, a mental health organization. So yeah, right now, yeah, Humorphobe's kind of like dabbling in that world. Yeah.
Amazing. And my final question for everyone is, and you've touched on this a little bit, but the podcast is called Love Through It, and the whole idea behind, what I do with clients and what I believe is that, life is always giving us opportunities to suffer. And we can choose to fall down and be victimized and suffer, or we can choose to, pivot and open our hearts a little bit more and love through whatever it is that's happening to us. What is your favorite tool or tip or trick when you are down and you are disappointed or upset, to sort of pivot and change your headspace or your heart space? And obviously, usually the first thing that comes to mind intuitively is the best.
I think two things. It really helps me, one, to like slow down, right? Like just slow it all way down. And to recognize like everything's always changing and fleeting. So the way I feel right now is going to be different than the way I feel 5 minutes from now. Yes. It also really helps me. I tend to see everybody as like a little kid. Just because this person's in an adult body doesn't mean that they're acting from their adult self, right? It's like usually we're like, oh, I feel scared. And I'm having to play this part of this like person who's in charge and in power, but like maybe I never learned that. So, when someone's like going nuts in the line at Walmart, I'm like, hey, it's okay. Like we're okay. And that really helps me like love other people through it, and also myself, like, can I catch myself and be compassionate and like really gentle and tender with me when this old stuff comes in and I get harsh or critical or like I should. It's like, hey, it's okay. We're all just little kids. Like, take a nap, eat a snack, lay down. Like, it's going to be different when you wake up, So yeah. Can I ask you the same question? Like,
Sure.
What do you do?
I love that. Okay. That's so funny. I don't think anyone's asked it back. For me lately, because I actually woke up on the wrong side of the bed today because my sleep has been really funny lately. And if meditation doesn't work, because it didn't today, I move my body.
Good.
So I go outside, especially if it's nice. So walking, or I try to go to yoga. Those two things, some sort of meditation or some sort of movement usually changes my mood and focus and my energy in my body essentially. And then I think it's really funny. I was laughing at the little kid thing too, because I remember I had this one boyfriend and we would always talk about, because I think we triggered a lot of inner child things for each other. And we would talk about it. It's like we're just a bunch of like little wounded kids like bumping into each other's pain.
Yes,
like that's
all the time.
This is, right?
Yeah.
But really trying to zoom out a bit, and this is where like being a comedian I think helps, where it's like sometimes I look at the things I'm upset about, I'm like, you're so ridiculous, Lianna, like this is so not a big deal, and like you're tired, maybe you haven't pooped yet, like this is what this
big
is.
Deal.
So yeah, meditation, breathing, and then reframing, and like kind of just laughing at myself a bit, because I think we all, especially, and this is why I was so excited to talk to you, like in this space, especially in like healing and trauma work, or I work with so many people who have like disordered eating and really bad relationships with their bodies, where it can be so serious and so heavy. And like, it doesn't have to be like what you're doing with like, the comedy healing stuff. Like, I think if you laugh through it, it makes this whole process like almost fun, right? Like, so it's the same. Like I used to do these group programs for women during the pandemic, and we would just be laughing and crying, right? And there'd be so much connection around this stuff because of course it hurts, but like human beings are ridiculous. And the stuff that we get upset about, like I'm upset about something from when I was like 5 years old. Like that's absurd. Like, is it valid? And should I feel that? Yes. But we can also laugh that like, this is why I'm being a dickhead right now. And
Totally.
and I love that, right? It's like, if I can just sort of like take a step back and like tease myself a little bit, or like, what am I doing? After I sort of feel the feelings, I can tend to reframe it in a way where it's kind of silly and I've learned something.
I mean, isn't it wild? We're literally floating around on a speck of dust, like hurtling through space. And we're all like, my Amazon package didn't come. And it's like, is it really that important? But I will say too, I love that you tied the laughter and like comedy back into this. A lot of people don't, like in the work I do, don't understand that. We're like, what do you mean you're laughing at people's trauma? And I'm like, no, comedy is the tool that you use to disarm somebody and connect with them. And then you can go deeper. And it is magical.
It is. It's incredible. It's incredible. And that's where I think the comedy, even as like, there's no wonder like so many wounded people are drawn to comedy because it is a beautiful way to heal. But it's the best. And having a good cry and then having a good laugh afterwards, like, that's as good as an orgasm in my book. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels great.
Yeah. Yes.
This has been such a pleasure. I mean, I'm so excited to share you with my audience and elevate what you're doing in the world, because I think it's incredibly important. If there's any way I could continue to support what you're doing, I'd gladly do it, because I think we need women like you in the world, and you're making a huge difference. Where can people find you? Because they're going to want to.
Well, you can find me. Our practice is called Psychosomatica. So psychosomatica.com. Humorforhope.com is the comedy therapy stuff. Or my Instagram is Hopra, like Oprah with an H. You see what I did there?
Cute. She's clever, guys. She's clever.
Wow, she's got jokes. I will say before we go, I just want to say thank you. Like, I think it's so powerful and important for women to support other women. So I'm so grateful to be here with you. And I mean, it sounds like you've also had an incredible journey that's been tough at times. Like, thanks for sharing it with me. I get it. I see you. And it's been so nice to be like, share this space with you. And the world needs more women where we can just be like, yeah, me too. So
yeah, I agree. Thank you. That's so beautiful. And I feel seen. You guys, like, I think she's a great therapist. I already feel therapized by accident. I didn't even realize I was going to get that. But yeah, if you're ever doing anything cool, you want to come back and promote it, like, we would love to have you. I'm sure we can have 8 million more fabulous, interesting conversations about, like, I'm not even going to bring this up, but I was looking at your acting resume, and the very bottom of like special skills says, was wrongly imprisoned and jailed in the Middle East and had to negotiate my way out. So you have to come back and talk about that next time.
Okay.
That's on your special skills. I had like horseback riding on mine. Like, this bitch is awesome. So we can talk about it. She can do therapy. She can do psychedelics. She can hold space. If you guys end up in jail with her, you're fine.
I can break you out of a hostage situation. What do you need?
What can't she do? And she's funny. Oh, gosh. All right. Thank you so much.
You're a dream.
More to come. I'm now going to I'm a fan. So this is not the last you've heard of me. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. I hope you feel better today. And thanks again for having me.
Absolutely.